God. Maybe you guide us by your Spirit and lead us into all truth. Lord, as we go into this lesson, we also place ourselves before you. And we're so convinced that you're filled with the beauty and light and care deeply about us. Thank you so much. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I think from the
Okay.
GC2 church, they
Can
need
you
to
mute
mute
everybody? Mute.
Yeah.
Okay, Douglas, over to you, bro.
Bro, please unmute yourself and speak. Bro, Douglas, please.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. I want to say thank you to all of my brothers and sisters this evening who are making this time to look into these topics. We're going to have several short classes, but I'll begin with a little bit of a global or ministry update, which I'll be very happy to share with you. It's just something a little more personal. Normally, when I come to Atlanta, and that would be you can see it marked on the left of the picture. If I'm coming to India, I guess that looks like Singapore. But normally when I come to Asia, it's by flight. But as you know, things have changed so much now. And this year, I think I've done more teaching online through Zoom than I have getting on airplanes, going up in the sky and then landing and adjusting to the new time zone and everything. And it's working very well. I'm happy that you decided to join today with Dhaka, Bangladesh. It was their idea first. I bring you greetings from Atlanta and from Atlanta's largest congregation, which is North River. It's a church of 1,000 or maybe 1,200 people, which started 15 years ago. And I'm a member, we're members, but not for much longer because we're leaving. I'll talk about that later. But lots of young people, lots of energy. Here you can see some of them. I think that's on the coast of Africa. Of course, Atlanta is also a place where it's not just the headquarters for Coca-Cola and other important things like CNN, the cable news network. It's a center for civil rights and for protest right now. And if you saw the news recently, another unarmed black man was killed by the police. It was horrible. Everyone is talking, and this is affecting the whole country. And I know from the BBC that protests for justice are common worldwide right now. And I hear from brothers and sisters all over. And we had the combination of that with this pandemic, which should not have caught us by surprise, but it did. And again, this affects everyone. I'm sure all of you know people who are affected, who've suffered various kinds of loss because of this, maybe even their own lives. Let's have another prayer, and then we'll begin. Lord, we ask you to smile upon us as your people, a universal brotherhood of believers, not just in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, United States, but all over the world. We know we should care not just about our own things, but your love is outward directed. And please give strength and wisdom to people who make decisions, especially right now in a time of sickness and protest and upheaval. We ask that in Jesus, amen. Well, here's our plan for today. I'm going to share about the International Bible Teaching Ministry, what I call IBTM, which I work with. And then we'll have several lessons from Thessalonians. So first, you won't learn anything biblical, but maybe it'll be encouraging. I do work all over the world. In North America, for example, which is mainly Mexico, Canada, United States, but also the Caribbean is part of North America. And that's an important place because you do biblical training in that area. These are our two most prominent teachers on either side of me. That's me in the middle. That's before I turned 60 and got my beard. They both work full-time. They're lawyers, very responsible fellows. Actually, the one on your left just got his PhD. The one on the right has published a couple of books. They're well-connected, a great encouragement because I don't mind going there to teach, but these guys know the culture and they live there. Our meetings there are normally in Jamaica or in Trinidad. And it's not just a staff thing. A lot of people come together for this who really want to learn, and some who appreciate it the most are the older Christians. As you can see, it's not very nice. It's very ugly. See, actually, it's fine. But it's wonderful because we're able to stay connected with people everywhere, and they send their greetings from one church to another. In the middle is one of our preachers, Jeff Hickman, here in Atlanta, who also does teaching down there in the Caribbean. Here are the four of us together. And it's interesting to have relationships that are very encouraging all over the world. And you can see that there's a lot of joy. When people learn the Bible, I think it's like Nehemiah 8, verse 8 and Nehemiah 8, verse 12. They're very happy to be learning. Actually, you see one face in this picture. See the boy on the left? He's not smiling right now. He came to that last conference as a non-Christian. He was baptized 2 weeks later. He had so many questions, but finally, just learning the word helped him to make a change in his life. Oh, I could tell you stories about all these things, but that's a typical gathering for our biblical training. And it's like the old MTP, except now we call it AIM, and AIM it's bigger. I had a chance when Obama was the president of the United States. Obama was a real gentleman. I'm sorry? Okay, I thought you were talking to me. When Obama was president, the relationship with Cuba, which is that large island right there under Florida, and everyone knows these faces, especially Che, the revolutionary. For all rebellious people, he's a patron saint. And then on the left, you have Fidel Castro. But it was easy to go because of the way he was. Unfortunately, our current president has created great tension, and now it's no longer possible for me to go. But I was happy to go to Cuba. It's an amazing place. It's a communist country. You know, there are only 5 actual communist countries. Of course, there are communist states and provinces here and there. But it was just wonderful to be with them. They're underground. It's actually 4 or 5 churches around the country, but meeting with the underground. Here's the leader who, when I was there, he was the leader. He's also an artist. No money from the church. Simply, he paints, and that's his wife there. So she's not Cuban. She's actually from West Africa. But a church with relationships, with old people, with young people, squeezing in, trying not to get arrested by the government. And just like you and me, you would love them. Another North American area, of course, is Canada. And Canada is one of the world's largest countries. Can you see those yellow triangles? Those are the places where I work in Canada. You'd say, well, they're all very far south. Why don't you go farther north? Well, because almost no one lives up there. Most people live in the south. It's also quite cold, especially in the winter, which I love because I love extreme heat and extreme cold. This is from the city of Winnipeg, which is a very flat place. The first time I spoke there, the church had a goal. Whole church would read the Old Testament that year. So they had me to come and teach on Exodus. I was there again last year, and they're doing well. Here you can see a beautiful mountain. It's not the Himalaya, although it may remind you of that. But this is actually what's called the Rocky Mountains, and that's in Canada and the United States. And I had an opportunity to, when I was teaching in 2 Canadian cities, to go and just have a few days alone, a kind of personal spiritual retreat, to get my head together, to make some decisions, to just be honest and to walk a lot. And it snowed, and that was great. So sometimes I get time off, but usually when I go somewhere, I'm just with the brothers and sisters and teaching, and then I go home. United States, some of the recent places, Knoxville. Rutgers is a university, very respected university. You see the brother next to me, I'm on the left. The fellow on the right came up to me and he asked me, "Douglas, do you remember me?" I said, "Help me out." He said, "I drove you home from the university 32 years ago. Do you remember?" Okay, so when we become older Christians, we don't always remember, but still, it was great to see him. But to be able to teach at different universities is one of my favorite things to do, especially where I know I'll get tough questions from the audience. So again, there's stories with all of these. This was my last trip to Boston. It was snowing. actually a blizzard was coming, a really large snowfall. And I didn't have to fly. I was coming from another city, but I thought, let me go and get done what I need to do, which was to do some filming. And then I was snowed in with my friend, and that was wonderful. Soon after, I'm here in San Diego on the Pacific coast, teaching on all kinds of cool things like postmodern philosophy. This is in Nevada. I go to Latin America. So Latin America, there are many Latin people in the United States. Spanish is our #2 language, but and American English is the #1. From Mexico, you go south to Central America, and then you have South America. Here I am in the nation of Nicaragua. I'm the guy on the left. You can recognize me. But to speak in places where Spanish is spoken gives me an opportunity to work on that language. Last year, I was in Mexico City. I was supposed to be in Mexico again a few weeks ago, but it was canceled because of the coronavirus. Here I am with Arturo, who's our principal teacher in Mexico, and he has put hundreds of people through a biblical training program. And he's loved and respected by many, although some people, maybe some staff people, some senior people, they don't like him very much because he doesn't always just say yes. Here I am, this is in Mexico City with the campus ministry of one region. They have a lot of students, but the joy of the young people. And here people are graduating, they're getting diplomas, and you can see arrows pointing to 3 of them. Those 3 were appointed teachers. In fact, this year we were going to appoint another, but the coronavirus stopped us. But you can see 3 people there, 2 men and a woman, 2 men and a woman. The couple, Oscar and Carolina, they run the largest Christian bookstore in Latin America. And the other fellow, Jose Carlos, is just a brilliant man, wonderful guy. You would love these people. I go to Africa a lot, and soon I'll be able to go there even more, but usually once or twice a year. Here I am with one of the African teachers named Gilbert Kemeng. Gilbert really represents who we are as a movement. He speaks French fluently from his upbringing, his background, and he speaks English perfectly. But he became a Christian in Berlin, so he speaks German fluently. Now, I've been with him in French Africa, I've been with him in Germany and Switzerland and other places. We've taught together. The last time we did something big together, I saw him actually a few weeks ago because we had a conference in the United States, but we went to the Congo. There are 2 Congos, 2 flags, 2 countries. Here, you're looking at the Little Congo. That's the one in green, and the big Congo is bordering it. But Gilbert and I went to the Little Congo, and then went to the big Congo, which is in the news all the time because of the Ebola virus and because of the killing. We went to the Little Congo, which is right across the river from the big Congo. We were late. Our plane got us in, but they lost Gilbert's baggage. And this was the leaders of that small church. It was supposed to be 20 people, but obviously many more than 20 people came. And they had been waiting an extra hour because we could not get Gilbert's baggage. No complaint, just happy, not too focused about time things, and very gracious. And that reminds me of, well, most of my experiences in India are like that. You guys are very flexible. But the guy who leads the church is on the far right of your picture. You can see Gilbert in the white shirt has his hand on his shoulder. On the far right, that's Geoffroy, who is an advisor to the president on energy. So he has access to the president who he talks to every day. We went out to lunch the next day. Then we crossed the river and came into Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is, again, a very large and often violent country. Very warm. You can see the church leader there and his wife. His name is Moses, and he is a great man. We met many years ago. This is a picture from midweek when I was teaching there. These are the campus group, some of the campus brothers, most of the campus brothers. That's me in the back. And there I am again. You can see Gilbert and the Congolese brothers. Here's a campus leader wearing an American, see that yellow shirt from basketball team, Los Angeles Lakers. Very giving and joyful. And I saw him the next night when I spoke Well, the first night he was wearing a business suit. He was coming from work. But the next night he was dressed that way. But someone said, did you know that man, he just lost his wife? I said, no, what happened? But you would not know. He's so joyful and giving. Yeah, they're newlyweds. And after a couple months of marriage, she was leading an all-night sisters prayer meeting. And just after midnight, she fell and died, just like that. And I know I'm not sharing with you something you don't know, but having to go through such pain and loss, and then having no choice but to go forward and take care of commitments in life, that's not unique to India. That's not unique to Pakistan or the Congo. Many parts of the world are like that. In the West, we would complain, but there's a smile. And of course, this is very challenging. 3 of our teachers in Africa who were appointed a couple of years ago, and these were all former students of mine. And one of them is doing his doctorate now, another his master's. It's very encouraging. Counting last year, we have a number of new teachers appointed in Africa, as you can see. South Africa, where they speak English and other languages. I was there in December, the last trip I had last year. I went to Madagascar also, which is that island right off the bottom right, Madagascar, which is having a little problem with a civil war, but it's kind of under control right now. But it was just so good to be with the church. They all speak French and Malagasy. So as normal, when I speak, I'm being translated. There's the oldest Christian in the church with me. And there's the preacher. Then we went to Malawi. I took a neighbor, a friend of mine. We went to Malawi, which is there. Can you see the red? Yeah. And Malawi is a place where I taught on Thessalonians, and that's the idea I'm going to share with you in a few moments. But this is actually me. People don't know it, but I am an African chief. On my first visit to the Ivory Coast, I was appointed chief, or Nana, Kwame, which means Sunday, Kudu, which is antelope, because I jump around. So I'm Nana Kwame Kudu Le Premier, and I was on television in front of an audience of 2,000. And, you know, it's kind of interesting. I got special clothes and I came home, and at that time our children were younger, because now our children our middle child is turning 30 soon. But even at that time, the kids thought, wow, our dad's an African chief. But I was asked later, how are your subjects doing? Well, I don't know. I need to keep in better contact. I get to work not only in Africa, but in the Middle East, all over. I'm not permitted in Iran, but I'm allowed to go to most other places. And I want you especially, of course, to pray for the Muslim mission. As more and more Muslims are being baptized publicly or in underground churches, that's important. And of course, we have the Far East and places I've had a chance to go to. Well, they're fighting a lot right now, but normally every year I'm in Asia at least once or twice. This is from a visit to Myanmar. My second visit to this Buddhist country. Burma, or Myanmar, is the place where the Buddhists persecute the Muslims. And I'm saying that correctly. That's a shrine where the Buddha himself was 2,500 years ago. Well, so I was there, and then I was there again 3.5 years later, and the church was a lot bigger, and that was encouraging to me. Singapore, I get to go to. Indonesia, this is speaking at a small church of about 200 in Batam, just across the water from Singapore, about half hour by boat. And you can see here, there's another place called Georgia. Now, Georgia is where I live, where Atlanta is, but that's the original Georgia. Can you see where the arrow points? So it's near Turkey, near Iran. And I had an opportunity to teach there with a friend named Christian Ray from United States. He's from Chile. He lived in Portuguese-speaking Africa, became a Christian in Russia, and was a Russian rock star for many years. And we talk frequently, but he and his wife joined me on this trip. Oh, there's a church building that's 1,600 years old. So that's very early on, when Christianity was not so corrupt. And here I am in the capital. It was a singles conference, and people came from all over. So Georgia, Azerbaijan is an all-Muslim country, 99% Muslim. But it's interesting because a survey last year revealed that most people in this country, Azerbaijan, they're Muslims, but they say their faith doesn't really matter. Over half, one half say the faith doesn't matter to them, doesn't affect their lives at all, which to me tells them that they're quite open. When I taught there, because they speak the Azeri language, but they also speak Russian because it used to be part of the Soviet Union, but they do not speak English. So we had to actually we had to pay for a non-Christian, and she came and she translated for me everything into Russian so they could understand in Azerbaijan. Incredible place. The Asian country where I probably work the most is China, particularly with the underground churches. As you can see, it's a complicated society. So what we do, I mean, I visit every year, but also produce lessons. They're called iFaith sermons, and they meet in small groups. These are very short, usually 10 to 15 minutes, no longer than 15. I've recorded about 50 of them now. They're free. You can have them. They're at YouTube. But they watch it and then they discuss as a group. Then they have a meal. They have their weekly meal together. And I think that's been very encouraging, and perhaps you'll be interested. I work in Europe, of course, and very soon, maybe in just a few weeks, we'll be living there because we're preparing to move back to the UK on a temporary basis, not to London, to Birmingham, but actually in the north to Scotland. So you can see England in the mustard yellow color, Scotland right above. We love that city, and it's close to where my wife's family are, and we're planning to live there for 5 years, and then we'll come back here to Atlanta. Just a couple more things, and then we'll finish the intro here. I have the opportunity to lead tours of the Bible with my friends like Steve Kennard in New York. Here we are in Garden of Gethsemane. Last year, I was actually in Israel 3 times. Right now, it's difficult because of the virus, though we're planning next year. This is one of my favorite pictures. This man has a camel. It's a camel named Samantha. And yes, it's a she camel. And the camel is trained to do a trick. So we were coming back to our hotel. We were in Jericho, and we were just stopping for a drink. And the camel comes and puts her head on your shoulder and then kisses you with her lips and licks your face. And that's why, I thought it was hilarious. I was there a few months later and we stopped at the same place, and who shows up but Samantha the camel, and she kissed me again. Now, I did confess this. When I was preaching in Atlanta, I told people the kiss, okay, I wasn't there, my wife was not there, but it did not mean anything to me. It was just a kiss, okay? But that's Samantha. In fact, I've seen her 3 times now. But bringing people to the land where the Bible story takes place is a very encouraging thing to do. At the end of last year, I was with North Carolina elders and church leaders. Most all of them came, and we led a tour. Here we are on the Mount of Olives. This year, Turkey in a few months, and then next year back to Israel and Italy. Oh, I didn't know this would come up. Ignore that. But the last few things: biblical training. I have public debates. I had a debate in May, actually 2 debates with a Baptist scholar. One was on, are we born again before baptism or in baptism? This is all at YouTube now. If you get my newsletter, you have the links there already. And then we had another debate on, is it possible for a Christian to lose salvation? We actually debated at 7:15 in the morning, but it was the only time that worked. And that has also gone live. That's been available for a week. The debate before that was my third debate with Sheikh Shabir Ali. So debating with Muslims or Jews, agnostics and atheists, I think it's an important thing to do. It's important for us to interact with them, not just to talk about them, but to talk to them. Maybe one day we can arrange a debate in your city. I've got professorship in teaching in the graduate school. I do books here, a new book on Genesis. Throw away the old version, please. A book on the problem of suffering when God is silent, something that I think we all experience from time to time. And by the way, that book is free if you go to my website, douglasjacoby.com, or in the United States, go to douglasjacoby.com, and you can download that book for free, a PDF. And then my friend Joey Harris and I did a book called Informed, Untangling Destructive Interpretations of Scripture. I've got a podcast channel. If you're interested in the official kinds of podcasts like Google or Apple or Spotify. And I've got a newsletter, which if you've received, then most of what I've been showing you here, you've already seen pictures of. But if not, it was new. But I hope you'll sign up for that sometime. Okay, let's get right into the beginning of our teaching proper. But I just wanted you to know a little bit about me, what I'm doing, about the 7 different jobs I have, and my work around the world, trying to help Christians to be more biblically competent, more biblically literate. It's very hard work. It's not natural for people. And but I know that that's important if we're going to start growing again as a movement. We've almost totally stopped growing. If that's going to change, something has to change. We can't just do the old things. Well, as you can see, the first lesson is called Death is Not the End. And this is from Thessalonica. Now, I showed you a picture when I did the Africa portion. I was in Malawi. And they asked me, they asked me in Malawi if I could teach on the second coming and similar subjects. And so that's what happened. It went well, and I suggested that as one possibility for Kolkata, and Brother Prakash said, we like that. So just some quick background. Thessalonica, the church is established probably in the year 50. And we read about that in Acts 17. It was mature. It had been there for a long time. I don't know why I put this picture of a tree here, but it's a nice picture of an oak tree. Okay, here we are. So it was on Paul's second missionary journey. He started in the east in Antioch, and eventually he got to Thessalonica. That was right before Berea and Athens. But we read about that in Acts 17. Soon after Paul left, and he had to leave very quickly, because if you remember the story, there was persecution. And so he had to flee. He went to Berea, but trouble seemed to follow Paul wherever he went. But he wrote these 2 letters. And there's confusion that he's trying to clear up confusion about death, Jesus's return, and in particular, the question, do we have to be alive when Jesus comes back if we're going to be with him forever? If we die before he comes back, is there no hope? Now, I don't think you've thought of that. We're very used to Jesus not coming every generation, but at that time, it was a very live question. So the 3 short talks I'll do for you this evening are from 1st and 2nd Thessalonians. Now, you can find similar material, though it's not a PowerPoint, but you can find similar material in the iFaith series. So you go to iFaith, Douglas Jacoby, YouTube, you'll find them right there. So let's talk about death. Death is not the end for Christians. Now, of course, it is the end in a way, because if you die, that's the end of you. But we know it's not really the end of you because we see things through the light of the cross. One of our members, sadly, murdered on her way to church a few years ago. Things happen. It's not the end. She was 70, 72 years old, something like that. It's a horrible hit, very hard for her daughter, son-in-law, grandchildren. But obviously when anyone dies, or especially if it's violent, you're not expecting that. But it's not the end. There's still hope. I actually spend a lot of time in cemeteries. That first stone is the mother, and these are her 5 infant children. The oldest lived 1 year, and the youngest was just a couple of days. All 5 died. That reminds me how short life is. Paul says, 1 Thessalonians 4:13, but we do not want you to be uninformed, brothers and sisters, about those who are asleep, that you may not grieve as others who have no hope. For since we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so through Jesus, God will bring with him those who have fallen asleep. Now, fallen asleep doesn't mean if you fell asleep while I was doing this class. We're not talking about that. It's a common way of expressing death. Falling asleep it's just a figure of speech. So it's a metaphor for death. Now, there will be grief, but Paul says we should not grieve as others do who have no hope. He's not saying that we shouldn't grieve, because when Stephen was martyred, godly men mourned him and they buried him. Okay, in their culture, of course, they buried a body, not burn it. I don't think it matters to God. But godly people mourn. So grief's okay, but it's different. If you think that death is the end, I think that's a different kind of a grief. It's a grief without any hope at all. And of course, non-believers are called by Paul without hope and without God in the world. That's true of those who do not die in the Lord. Yes, there is something waiting for them. They'll be resurrected to judgment, and then they'll be punished. But death is the end. Now, we're not just animals. This was some ancient cow, I think. I took this picture in a museum. You know, our future is not just to be like that. It's something much more dynamic. Death is a doorway into a totally new realm of existence. Do you believe that? Do you believe that? Will be resurrected in a body and in the presence of God. So we will be resurrected. We don't die and go to heaven. We don't die and then our spirit is taken up to the skies and we bow before the throne of the judge, not without a resurrection first. And so we do that in the very presence of God. So death is not the end. When I'm with Christians who are dying, and I'm sure you have the experience too, what do you say to them? Well, one thing I say to them is, I'll see you on the other side, because I really believe that is what will happen. Let's continue the text. For this we declare to you by word from the Lord, that we who are alive, who are left until the coming of the Lord, will not precede those who've fallen asleep. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a cry of command and the voice of an archangel and with the sound of the trumpet of God. And the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive, who are left, will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. And so we will always be with the Lord. Therefore, encourage one another with these words. I'm speaking this evening to a group of mainly church leaders, but I'm quite sure everybody is familiar with this passage. And it says that we'll rise up in the air to meet the Lord and we'll always be with the Lord. The way we often read that is that we'll always be with the Lord in the air. We'll go up in the clouds and that's where we'll be given our wings and our harp and we'll be up there. And we'll be looking down on everybody else. I'm not sure that's biblical. Let's talk about this a little bit. What happens? Christ will return. There's the trumpet call. We read about that here in verse 16, but also in 1 Corinthians 15. Okay, that gets everyone's attention. It would get my attention. This means that history is moving towards an end. So in many cultures and many philosophies and religion, this is not the case. For example, in Hinduism, which is a major world religion, history goes in cycles. Things go round and round. You have a yuga. You've got the Kali Yuga, the 4.3 million years, but things go around and around and around. It's more cyclical or cyclical. We understand this because of Judaism, because Christianity is the extension of Judaism. And the Muslims, they stole it from us. But we understand that history is going somewhere. It's not going around in a circle, infinite forever. It's leading somewhere. And that means how we live is truly important. We can't say, well, I'll be casual. Maybe in my next reincarnation, it won't be so good, but eventually it will work out. You know, we can't be like that because we understand history is moving towards an end. Departed believers will rise from the dead after waiting in paradise. Jesus told the thief, actually, you know, I spoke on this in Delhi some years ago. I remember that. We had a lot of fun. But remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus says to the thief on the cross, I tell you, today you'll be with me in paradise. We believe that that is where the righteous dead are waiting for the judgment day. We're in paradise. If we've died, we're waiting for the resurrection of our body and the judgment. And after that, there'll be heaven. But there's no judgment day before the resurrection. Now, I'm sure I've been teaching this for 30 years. You probably have heard it, but let me just say it in case there's someone who's new. No one's in heaven now. No one's in hell now. There is no hell. Not yet. After the judgment day, yes, then God will punish a reward. After the judgment day, people go to heaven, but you don't go to heaven without the resurrection body. And that doesn't happen until the last trumpet. And that doesn't happen until Jesus comes again. Therefore, we're simply waiting. If we've died, we're waiting. Paul says we will join them in the air. See, the dead in Christ will rise first. We'll join them. Whoever is still alive on the earth at that time will meet the Lord in the air. Quite a thought, huh? Think, what will my balance be like? Do you have a fear of heights? Are you afraid of being up high places? What does that mean, meet the Lord in the air? Okay, we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about where heaven is. The Lord will take us up into heaven. Heaven is away from the earth. That is, I think, a fairly traditional understanding of it. Like in John 14, I'll come. Jesus says, I'll come and take you to be with me. Although later in John 14, he says, I'm preparing a place for you. But in the middle of chapter 14, he says, the Father and I will live in you. So it sounds like the place that's being prepared maybe is not up there. But we assume that heaven will be up. The other view is that we will accompany Christ to the earth. We'll rise, we'll meet him in the air, and then we'll come together to a renewed and cleansed planet. There's evidence for both of these views, though more and more biblical scholars are understanding that the second view is the correct view. So the common view will go up, but you have this idea in Revelation that heaven comes to earth. The New Jerusalem comes out of heaven onto the earth, whatever that means. Let me give you a simple analogy. When I'm visiting a country, my friend meets me at the airport, not to return with me to my country, but to welcome me to his country. If I fly into Calcutta and Prakash and Joyce come to meet me in the airport, they don't go through security, take me onto the plane, and we all fly away. No, they actually welcome me, escort me into Calcutta, where I'll be staying with them. Does that make sense? In ancient times, townspeople went out of the village if an important person was visiting. Now, I think you may have seen something like this in the rural parts of your own countries. If someone's on the way, important people might walk outside the village and welcome them in. In classical times, Julius Caesar received welcomes from the towns he visited just like this. And there are examples of this with other people too. So as he toured the countryside, people would come out of their town or village, and they would lavish him with praise and gifts, and they would walk with him and escort him back into their village. This idea we find in the parable of the foolish virgins. The bridegroom is met this way. It's actually the same word as in 1 Thessalonians 4. Remember these words? Here's the bridegroom, come out to meet him. So they come out to meet the bridegroom, then they all go into the feast and they close the door. And the ones who were unwise, no meal for them, they're shut out. When Paul came to Rome after his last journey that we have in Acts, it's the same word, the word of meeting or hapanthesis. They come, and I read from the end of Acts 28. And the brothers, when they heard about us, came as far as the Forum of the Three Taverns to meet us. On seeing them, Paul thanked God and took courage. And when he came to Rome, Paul was allowed to stay. by himself. So that's exactly the idea. So they come out and they welcome him in, not to take him to another country or a faraway place, but to bring him to Rome. I wasn't totally sure about this. I contacted a friend of mine who's a biblical scholar, a New Testament scholar, and his specialty is Thessalonians. And these are his words. He said, yes, I'm convinced Paul is evoking the image, well known in the city of Thessalonica, the city which worked hard on promoting its relationship with Rome, of the city sending a delegation party or reception group to meet the visiting dignitary, who would then escort that important person to their city. So if that's the case, when we rise up in the air, we're welcoming Jesus to our world, which will be made new. And that means we're not forever in the air in the clouds, but we're forever on a new earth, because there's a new heaven and a new earth. We read about that in Isaiah, we read about that in Revelation. So to clarify, I'm not saying we won't be in heaven. No, ultimately, after Judgment Day, that's where we'll be. But the question is, where exactly is heaven? For us, where is that? Is it up or down? Is it here or there? Ancient Christians actually seem to have different views on this. Some thought of a city on the earth. Others thought we remain in paradise, but usually that's considered to be simply the waiting place. And others thought we went up. So I don't think they were too sure, which means it's not so very important. And it's not a matter of salvation. You're free to believe in accordance with your understanding of the scriptures. I'm not trying to force anything here, but I'm bringing up the possibility in 1 Thessalonians 4 that when we rise in the air, what happens next is not what we think happens. It's not what our tradition tells us, but it may be something very different and something difficult to understand without some knowledge of the ancient culture. Well, there's much more we could say about 1 Thessalonians 4, but in a short talk, we're limited. For example, people like to combine 1 Thessalonians 4, where we're taken up, or we're snatched up, or raptured up, and they want to put that with Revelation chapter 4, and to show that we're raptured before there's a tribulation. This just doesn't work at all. Have you seen pictures like this before? There's the Lord in the clouds, and you have cars and lorries going out of control. Fires will be breaking out. It'll be really bad. Plagues on the earth. That's fantasy. That's not a biblical picture. So what is application here? Let's talk about what this means to us. The last words in our passage are these. Therefore, encourage one another with these words. So that means that we should talk about the second coming. Well, especially if we have confusion about this, because then we're in the kind of situation the Thessalonians were. Let's talk about it, but not staying up past midnight and just speculating. Let's become informed. Let's talk about it constructively. Next, we see that Paul wants us to be clear, not about the details, but about the broad outline. Now, when I say the broad outline, I mean the dead in Christ do have hope. So it's not the end. We'll all join the Lord together when he returns, but the general resurrection happens first, and then we have heaven. But if we're looking for very precise details, we're not going to find them. This also means that when a loved one dies, we don't need to overreact. React, yes. Mourn, yes. But death's not the end for those who tried to follow Christ in their earthly lives. It also means this: the time between now and the end of the world, we don't know how long that is. The clock is ticking. So let's make the most of it. Let's make the most of that time. I showed you a picture before of a cemetery. You may think I'm unusual, but most days I pray in a cemetery because it reminds me that life is short. I'm not counting up my years at my age, I'm counting down. It reminds me that it really does matter, that I will end. There is an end for me, earth in this earthly body. There's something after that, though, to look forward to. And so with these things in mind, our next message, which builds on this one, is from 1 Thessalonians 5. And that's called Don't Predict, Prepare. For now, we're going to take a 5-minute break. After the third message, we'll have time maybe for some questions in chat, but for right now, it's time for a break. This will be 5 minutes, and then I'll start teaching again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like, Prakash, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
My wife, she's just leaving, but Vicky wants to say hello to the brothers and sisters in all these countries.
Yes, that would be great.
Can
Hi,
you see her?
Prakash.
Hi.
I'm so glad you're getting to get some teaching, and it's just so encouraging to see so many of you tuning in or on Vimeo, whatever it is you're using, whichever platform, but we're so excited, and you're in our prayers constantly.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you so much, Vicky.
Great to see you. Have a great workshop.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
We still have 4 minutes left.
Okay. Bro.
Oh, whoops, I pulled the cord out. Oh, it shouldn't matter because we've got, Prakash, can you hear me?
Yes, bro. I can hear you loud and clear.
Are there any technical issues we need to discuss, or
No, we
everything
are fine. We are great. I'm going to just stop this the YouTube and get it ready for the next session.
Right, so that session was about 45 minutes,
Great, bro.
which was 5 minutes shorter than I thought it would be.
Amen.
But you're not complaining.
I am not complaining, bro. You can go as long as you want.
Oh, you know my philosophy of time. I'm going to get some
Yes.
more water, but I'll be
Yes,
back
bro.
in.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay.
A few minutes break here.
Okay.